Imagine waking up to the news that Mount Everest, the world's tallest mountain, has just exploded like a volcano. It's a scenario that sounds straight out of a science fiction movie, but what would actually happen if such an event took place? In this video, we'll explore the dramatic consequences of Everest erupting, from the immediate devastation to the long-term impact on the planet. Let's begin by understanding what makes Everest unique and why this hypothetical explosion would be so extraordinary. Mount Everest is not a volcano. It's a massive mountain formed by the collision of tectonic plates pushing the land upward over millions of years. Unlike volcanoes, which are formed by molten rock erupting from the Earth's mantle, Everest is made of solid rock and ice. This means that, under normal circumstances, it doesn't have the underground magma chambers or pressure needed to cause a volcanic eruption. But let's suspend disbelief and imagine what would happen if Everest suddenly behaved like a volcano. Everest to explode like a volcano, it would need a source of magma beneath it. In our scenario, let's imagine a sudden massive magma chamber forms under Everest, building up enormous pressure. Eventually, this pressure would force its way to the surface, blasting through the rock and ice in a catastrophic eruption. The explosion would be unlike anything ever witnessed in the Himalayas, sending shockwaves across the region and changing the landscape forever. The initial explosion would be devastating. Tons of rock, ash, and ice would be hurled into the sky, creating a massive plume visible for hundreds of miles. The force of the blast would flat everything nearby, including base camps, villages, and forests. The shockwave would shatter windows and structures far beyond the immediate area. The sound alone would be deafening, echoing through the Himalayas and beyond. As the eruption continues, a towering ash cloud would rise high into the atmosphere. This cloud could block sunlight for days or even weeks, plunging the region into darkness. Ash would rain down on cities and villages, covering everything in a thick, gray layer. Breathing would become difficult, and visibility would drop dramatically, making travel and rescue efforts nearly impossible. Force of the explosion would trigger massive avalanches and landslides on all sides of Everest. Snow, ice, and rocks would cascade down the slopes, burying everything in their path. These secondary disasters would add to the chaos, destroying roads, bridges, and entire communities. Rescue teams would face enormous challenges trying to reach survivors in such treacherous conditions. Everest is home to some of the world's largest glaciers. The intense heat from the eruption would cause these glaciers to melt rapidly, sending torrents of water rushing down the mountainsides. Flash floods would sweep through valleys, destroying homes, farmland, and infrastructure. The sudden influx of water could also trigger further landslides and mudflows, compounding the devastation. The explosion and its aftermath would be catastrophic for the region's wildlife. Animals living on and around Everest would be caught in the blast or forced to flee their habitats. Many species, from snow leopards to rare birds, could face extinction due to the loss of habitat and food sources. The delicate balance of the Himalayan ecosystem would be shattered, with consequences that could last for generations. Human cost would be immense. Thousands of people live in the shadow of Everest, including Sherpa communities and climbers from around the world. The eruption would destroy villages, cut off escape routes, and overwhelm emergency services. Survivors would face shortages of food, clean water, and medical supplies. The psychological impact of such a disaster would be felt for years to come. Volcanic eruption of this scale would have global consequences. The ash and gases released into the atmosphere could alter weather patterns, causing temperatures to drop worldwide. Crops could fail due to reduced sunlight, leading to food shortages in distant countries. Scientists would study the event for decades, trying to understand its impact on the planet's climate. The ash cloud from Everest's eruption would pose a major hazard to air travel. Flights would be grounded across Asia, and routes would be diverted to avoid the dangerous plume. Airports in Nepal, India, China, and beyond would face massive delays and cancellations. The economic impact on tourism and trade would be severe, affecting millions of people. The region around Everest relies heavily on tourism, especially from climbers and trekkers. The eruption would devastate this industry, putting thousands out of work. Local businesses, from hotels to guides, would struggle to survive. The cost of rebuilding infrastructure and providing aid would strain government resources, leading to long-term economic hardship. Mount Everest is more than just a mountain, it's a sacred site for many local cultures. The eruption would destroy ancient monasteries, temples, and cultural landmarks. Priceless artifacts and traditions could be lost forever. The spiritual and emotional loss for the people of the Himalayas would be immeasurable, adding another layer of tragedy to the disaster. Long after the eruption, the environment around Everest would remain scarred. Rivers could be choked with ash and debris, making them unsafe for drinking or farming. Forests and grasslands would take years to recover if they ever do. The loss of vegetation would lead to soil erosion, making future landslides even more likely. Breathing in volcanic ash can cause serious health problems, from respiratory issues to eye irritation. Hospitals would be overwhelmed with patients suffering from these conditions. Children and the elderly would be especially vulnerable. The health crisis could last for months, with lingering effects on the population's well-being. The explosion would obliterate Everest's iconic summit, forever changing the world's tallest peak. The mountain could be reduced to a jagged crater, erasing the goal of countless climbers. Maps and records would need to be rewritten, and the dream of reaching the top of the world would be lost for future generations. The force of Everest's eruption would send shockwaves through the entire Himalayan range. Nearby peaks could be destabilized, triggering further landslides and avalanches. The geological impact would be studied for years as scientists try to understand how such a massive event could reshape the world's highest mountains. The explosion could even affect the movement of tectonic plates in the region. The sudden release of pressure might trigger earthquakes both locally and in distant areas. These quakes could cause further destruction, making recovery even more difficult for affected communities. Many of Asia's great rivers originate in the Himalayas. The eruption could block or redirect these rivers, affecting water supplies for millions of people downstream. Flooding and droughts could become more common, threatening agriculture and livelihoods across the continent. Melting glaciers could create unstable lakes high in the mountains. If these lakes burst their banks, they would unleash deadly floods on the valleys below. Such events, known as glacial lake outburst floods, have happened before in the Himalayas, but an Everest eruption would make them far more frequent and destructive. The explosion would disrupt ecosystems far beyond Everest itself. Ash and debris could travel for hundreds of miles, affecting forests, rivers, and grasslands. Plants and animals would struggle to survive in the altered environment, leading to a cascade of ecological changes. Countries around the world would rush to help Nepal and its neighbors. International aid organizations would mobilize to provide food, water, and medical care. The scale of the disaster would require a massive, coordinated response, with rescue teams and supplies arriving from every corner of the globe. News of Everest's eruption would dominate headlines worldwide. Journalists and camera crews would flock to the region, broadcasting images of the devastation. Social media would be flooded with stories and updates as people everywhere try to make sense of the unprecedented event. Despite the tragedy, scientists would seize the chance to study the eruption and its effects. Geologists, climatologists, and biologists would gather data to better understand volcanic processes and their impact on the environment. The event could lead to new discoveries about Earth's geology and climate systems. In the aftermath, survivors would begin the long process of rebuilding. Homes, schools, and businesses would need to be reconstructed from the ground up. International aid and local resilience would play key roles in helping communities recover and adapt to their new reality. The emotional scars left by the disaster would take even longer to heal. Survivors would need support to cope with grief, trauma, and loss. Mental health services would become a crucial part of the recovery effort, helping people find hope and rebuild their lives. Everest has long been a magnet for adventurers and tourists. After the eruption, the region's tourism industry would have to reinvent itself. New attractions might emerge, such as the crater left by the explosion, but the loss of the world's tallest peak would change the area's appeal forever. The Everest eruption would serve as a stark reminder of nature's power and unpredictability. Governments and scientists would use the lessons learned to improve disaster preparedness and response. The event could inspire new technologies and strategies to protect people from future catastrophes. In the face of such a disaster, people around the world would come together to offer support and solidarity. Fundraisers, charity events, and volunteer efforts would spring up everywhere. The tragedy could bring out the best in humanity, showing our capacity for compassion and cooperation. Over time, nature has a remarkable ability to heal. Plants would slowly begin to reclaim the devastated landscape, and animals might return as habitats recover. The process could take decades, but the Himalayas could eventually see new life emerge from the ashes of disaster. Despite the loss of sacred sites and traditions, the people of the Himalayas have a long history of resilience. Communities would find ways to preserve their culture and rebuild their spiritual lives. New traditions might emerge, honoring the memory of what was lost and celebrating the strength to endure. Scientists would use the Everest eruption as a case study to warn about other potential disasters. Research into volcanic hazards and tectonic activity would become even more important. Early warning systems and monitoring technology could be improved to save lives in the future. The disaster could prompt governments to rethink policies on disaster management and environmental protection. International agreements might be strengthened to ensure better cooperation and resource sharing in times of crisis. The world would be reminded of the need for global action in the face of natural threats. The loss of Everest's summit would change the world of mountaineering forever. Climbers would seek new challenges and other peaks might rise in popularity. The spirit of adventure would endure, but the landscape of high-altitude climbing would never be the same. For many, Everest is a sacred mountain, central to religious beliefs and practices. The eruption would challenge faith and prompt new interpretations of spiritual teachings. Religious leaders would help guide communities through grief, offering comfort and hope for renewal. Artists and writers would respond to the disaster with works that capture the tragedy and resilience of the region. Paintings, music, and literature would help people process their emotions and keep the memory of Everest alive. Art would play a vital role in healing and remembrance. Schools and universities would incorporate the Everest eruption into their curricula, teaching students about geology, disaster preparedness, and environmental stewardship. The event would become a powerful lesson in the importance of respecting nature and being ready for the unexpected. The need to recover from such a massive disaster could drive technological innovation. New tools for monitoring, rescue, and rebuilding might be developed, benefiting not just the Himalayas but disaster-prone regions everywhere. The tragedy could spark a wave of creative problem-solving. Environmental groups would use the Everest eruption to highlight the need for stronger protections for vulnerable ecosystems. Campaigns for conservation and climate action would gain momentum as people realize how quickly nature can change and how important it is to protect it. Communities would build memorials to honor those lost in the disaster. Ceremonies and anniversaries would keep the memory of Everest and its people alive. These acts of remembrance would help survivors find closure and ensure that the lessons of the tragedy are never forgotten. The explosion would create new geological features such as craters, lava fields, and altered river courses. Scientists and explorers would be eager to study and map these changes, gaining new insights into the forces that shape our planet. The loss of Everest would change the world of adventure travel. Climbers and explorers would look for new destinations and the focus might shift to other continents. The spirit of exploration would continue, but the world's highest challenge would be gone. Maps and atlases would need to be updated to reflect the new reality. The world's tallest mountain would no longer be Everest, and a new peak would take its place in the record books. This change would be a constant reminder of the event's impact on our planet. Despite the devastation, the story of Everest's eruption would also be one of hope. People would rebuild, nature would recover, and new opportunities would arise. The tragedy would inspire resilience, innovation, and a renewed commitment to protecting our planet. As we reach the end of our journey, it's clear that an Everest eruption would change the world in countless ways. While such a scenario is almost impossible, imagining it helps us appreciate the power of nature and the importance of being prepared for the unexpected. Let's carry these lessons forward, honoring the beauty and fragility of our planet.